This is Embrace Zoe, the podcast that celebrates struggles turned into strength. Truth is, life's uphill battle will either make you or break you. After every episode, I pray you're empowered knowing you have the spark that it takes to rise up in the dark and truly understand the power of light. I'm Michelle Salinas. Join me as we dig into the concept that money is not a villain. As Derrick Kinney shares in his story, it all starts with our heart and a holistic approach to success. Derrick, what an honor to speak to you today and to dive into your story. I love that you wear many titles and wear many hats. By far, though, outside of financial expert, always giving resources on national TV on how to empower people and making good financial decisions, author of an amazing book, podcaster of a very successful podcast yourself, you are a husband and a father.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the title I wear most proudly. I would say Jesus follower one, husband second, and dad third. And we were just talking offline. My oldest daughter, we have four kids, just got married a couple days ago. There was a moment in the chapel before my daughter walked down the aisle, and it was a first look. I got to see her in her dress. And I am not embarrassed to say this. I sobbed like a baby when I saw her. It was all this rush of emotion from the time she was born to going to school to all the times I've spontaneously danced with her and hugged her and told her how much I loved her, all culminated in just a couple seconds. And I just wept like a baby. And they happened to capture that picture. And so my family is giving me grief about how ugly a crier I was. But you know what? I wear the crier face proudly because I was in the moment for her. And so it was such a beautiful thing. I feel like I'm on an emotional hangover right now. I'm so drained because I left it all on the field. And I'm so glad that God gave me that gift of experiencing all those emotions for that special day.
That is huge. I mean, it's a huge milestone. And like we were saying, it's what we pray for our children. But
Yes.
also, what I believe we pray for now that we do wear this responsibility of being a parent is for them to have this stability. And what I believe it's part of you as a person is that beyond, like you said, of course, Jesus follower first, husband, then father when it comes to your profession, you really handle it with a lot of intimacy in the way that you don't just want people to pick up tools and use them. You deeply want to see a positive impact in their lives so that it also too trickles into their households and then into their communities. So talk to me though, because the principle of Good Money Revolution, which I have your book here. I mentioned I would bring it up. It is so beautiful and colorful.
Thank
But
you.
when I open the introduction, the first line it just captured me right away. I was not destined for success, believe me. What did you mean by that? And how come you chose this super raw and really right off the gates, you are letting your readers into a very impactful time of your life?
Well, if we're being honest, I did not come from the gene pool of the popular kids. I was teased mercilessly as a kid. I've got a larger than average nose. And because of that, I was teased as a kid from sixth grade on through junior high and high school. And it really took me to a couple dark places. And I struggled with that, if we're being honest. And I reached a point, it was my junior year in high school. My mom, sensing my desperation and my loneliness, she gave me a book. And the book was written by a woman named Judy Zarifa. And the book was called Go For It. And it was a simple read about how to survive the teenage years. And there was one chapter, Michelle, that really stood out. And the title was How to Become Popular. And I thought, that's what I want. In a nutshell, if I could become popular, that might solve a lot of my problems. So I read the book and it talked about, greeting people by name and being nice, being a good listener. Well, I began to put these things into practice, and wouldn't you know it, it began to work. It began to build my confidence as a junior high school student. And so I then built up the courage to run for class office. I decided to run for student body president. Now, again, I wasn't the popular kid, I was the outsider looking in. But what I realized was there was a lot of other students like me that felt like they were outsiders but wanted to feel like an insider. We were all nobodies with the heart of a somebody. And so this idea came to my mind. There were all these groups in the school. There was back in my day, I graduated high school in 1987. There was the rock and roll crowd and the country western crowd and the band crowd and the studious crowd, and everybody sort of congregated in different parts of the high school. Nobody really interacted together. So the idea was, what if I reached out to the leaders of all of those groups and said, hey, would you be willing to get a picture taken with me? And I'm going to put the picture of us shaking hands on a poster board with your endorsement where you and your friends hang out together. And so we did this all around the school. And suddenly what happened was there was this buzz of people feeling like they were part of something bigger. So there were 5 people that ran that day. And by the way, I actually had saved some money up, and this is going to sound really crazy, but I rented a Lincoln Town car that my dad took a day off from work to drive. We put campaign posters on the car, and my buddies and I crawled in the car, and we went up and down the school cruising it as our campaign vehicle. And at the end of the day, when the microphone crackled and the assistant principal came on and said, and the winner of student body president is Derrick Kinney, it was surreal, Michelle, because it wasn't me that won that day. It was all of us. It was a victory for the people who've been teased and told they weren't good enough or smart enough or talented enough. They weren't popular enough. But all of us suddenly had a voice. And what it taught me was it helped me be successful in business because I realized people weren't hiring always the smartest person or the person that knew the most. It was the person who listened to them and made them feel heard and valued and respected.
These moments in our life could really make us or break us. And you instead took this other route, all thanks to a wonderful book that hopefully was what ignited that. But I'm sure in your profession, you find a lot of people that feel like I'm just simply not making it, or I have not reached that societal expectation. How are you able to bring this like personal sort of mindset that you built in your teen years into the profession to tell those business owners or families trying to be financially in a better place that you too can apply that, and this is how?
I think I've learned a lot from my mistakes. I was 26 years old when I went into financial planning. I graduated with a communication degree and quickly realized that wasn't going to pay a whole lot. And so I pivoted to my passion, which was managing money. I just love money. I'm not afraid to admit that. I love to manage it and make it and give it. I just love the concept of making money, investing in all those pieces really fire me up. And one of the mistakes I made was when I first became a financial advisor was I thought I needed to impress people by being the smartest person in the room. And the
Mm,
reality is sometimes how you view yourself is vastly different than the perception people have of you, right?
mm.
And what I realized was people knew I looked like I was 26, I looked like I was 13. How much really could I know? And once I got burned a couple times trying to act like the smartest person in the room and people picking up on that and running the other direction, what I realized was I could become the smartest person in the room by asking people the smartest questions and
Mm,
learning about them and asking about their family and asking about what they were passionate about and talking about them, where we began to have people know me, like me, and trust me. And that was the foundation of relationships. And so now what I realized was no longer did I need to feel inferior or intimidated. When you walk into a room, for a lot of our listeners right now, you might walk into a room and you sort of size everybody up. It's just human nature. And I began to, oh my gosh, he's better looking than me, or how he looks more successful than me, or oh man, that's an advisor who's been in the business longer, and you walk into a room feeling less than before you even stepped into the room. And I said, that's not right. I don't want that for myself or anybody else. And what I found is the best person in a room is the person who makes other people feel like the best version of themselves. When you can pull out of them their goals and their dreams and their passions and what makes them tick, even if it doesn't result in business, now you've developed a relationship. And what I want to do is just leave a trail behind me of people to feel like they know me, like me, trust me. But it didn't come about easily. It was through a lot of mistakes. And what I find as a financial advisor, and I sold that business a couple of years ago, in launching new businesses, especially working with TV people and other fast moving people, you want to make sure that people know you are always the lower person on the totem pole, meaning you want them to feel like they're the most important person in your universe. If they feel heard and they feel genuinely, empathetically listened to, like they know that this person isn't distracted, they're not thinking about other stuff, they're not on their phone, they're like listening with their eyeballs, like a laser beam. I can tell this person is all into me in this moment.
Mm.
It's a powerful medium that I think for any service provider can really deepen relationships and actually truly grow their business.
Mm. And that's something that I feel are starting to lack in a little bit because we're so used to this maybe work from home mentality, do everything in the fast lane sort of thing, that we are losing that handshake with the locking of the eyes, with the let's sit
Yeah.
down, let's have coffee. So you bring up such a solid point that we are losing. When it comes to finance, especially right now, I believe that there's different types of people. Those that have a little bit of it and want to hold on to it and hoard it. There are those that have a lot of it and just don't make maybe the smartest decisions. They just splurge and splurge on fundamentally material things that just feed their own bottom line. And then there are those that want more of it and they are hungry to learn how to get more of it. But perhaps, like you and I, didn't come from generational wealth. I am a first generation migrant child, family from Costa Rica, money back home. I can tell you from my personal experience that I probably fall in a bucket that is not in those three categories, but rather one that says, I don't really know how to feel about money. From a take of all these different buckets and from your experience, how do we, regardless of what bucket we are in, how do we arrive here at the good money stage?
That's really the crux of why I wrote this book. So let me go back and tell you a story. As I was talking to more and more people about this concept of money being bad, one of the common stories that would come up was people would relate back to me their early childhood experiences. And one in particular, this particular person said, Derrick, growing up, I would often see my mom or dad or my grandma or grandpa, they would bang their fist on the table and say, if only we had more money, then we could do the things we want to do. Then we could have a better life. Then we could experience the joy that other people have. And so what began to happen was money began to be the villain in their story, that if only we had more of that, that was the secret to a more fulfilling life. And then as I began to dig into that, other people would share with me that, and this is something I really got distraught about and it really concerned me, was some parents would say, meaning not in a bad way, but this was their history. They would say, sometimes in life there's the haves and the have-nots. In our family, we come from the have-nots. There'll be other people that have more than us, and we just won't have anything in life. There's always going to be a limit. And that was fascinating because I come from a very positive minded, goal oriented drive. I didn't get it from my family per se, but it had welled up within me as a young person. And that's how I've led my own family. But when this became real for me, I went into the office on a Saturday morning to catch up on some stuff. And I saw my voicemail light blinking, and I knew I had to make a decision. Do I ignore it and work, or do I press that button? Because that might kind of distract me. A voice inside, I think it was the Holy Spirit, candidly said, Derrick, you need to listen to that message. Pressed play, and a frantic woman's voice said, Derrick, I know it's Saturday. I hope you get this message. Please, please call me. They're going to send me to jail, and I don't know what to do. Click.
Oh,
Well, you listen to that message, you know you can't let it go till Monday. I quickly called her back and I said, tell me what's happening. She said, Derrick, I got this letter in the mail and it said a check I wrote, there wasn't money in my account. The check bounced and now they're going to come get me and take me to jail. And I said, now, wait a minute. Does the letter clearly state that they're going to haul you off to jail? She said, no, but I just know that's what's going to happen. So what happened was she had forgotten to move money from her savings to checking, had written a check. She got the non-sufficient funds letter in the mail, and that scared her. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. On Monday, I will call the bank with you on a conference call. We'll physically move money over there to help you out. It's going to be okay. You're not going to be wearing an orange jumpsuit this weekend. So she laughed, but then she said, she began to tell me a story. She said, Derrick, here's why this bothered me so much. When I was a kid, she said, she remembered her dad going to a local clothing store to buy school clothes for she and her sister. And when her dad got back a couple days later, he got a phone call from the store manager saying, you bounced a check. I'm going to have the cops haul you off to jail. And as a young girl, she heard that conversation. So, as crazy as this is to believe, this woman is now 60 years old, but she was having the money beliefs as though she was 7. She
mm.
lived her entire life believing that if I make a mistake, if I do something foolish, if I bounce a check, they're going to haul me off to jail. And why this all suddenly made sense was I had worked with this woman for 15 years on the outside, highly successful, highly respected, well regarded in the local community, but she never took my financial advice. And it cost her lots of money. And she was always complaining about, I want the raise I never get. She never got promoted. I said, I tell you what, come in the office next week. Let's unpack all this. And what happened was, like peeling an onion, we began to write down all of the bad money beliefs that she carried almost like in a suitcase.
Mm.
Every moment of every minute of her life, she held that suitcase of bad money beliefs. And we wanted to unpack that and empty it out and begin to refill that suitcase with good money beliefs. And what happened was, within about 3 months, I was shocked. She got a $20,000 a year raise. She got a promotion. And selfishly, most important, she began to take my advice and began to make money on her investments. And so it was fascinating. And what I find is her story is not alone. There's a lot of people I talked to for this book, and a lot of people all around the country that if they're honest with themselves, if they're not making the money they feel like they deserve or they want, they're worthy of, and they're not working in a job they feel like brings out the best in them, if you peel it back, there might be a bad money belief that they've believed about themselves that they need to address it and dismiss it and invite some new good money beliefs into their neighborhood because it will dramatically increase the value of their home.
It's like a trickle effect. You change the perspective and everything else follows suit. You mentioned earlier that, you've adopted the positive, that it was a little bit different from the way you were raised. You do know some instances of that in your book. But if you can share, what was that growing up? What was money like for you? What was your relationship with money, or as it was represented to you as you were growing up?
Well, my parents were very hardworking. My dad was a metallurgical engineer, super, super smart. My mom worked part-time. And growing up as kids, you don't really sense the financial situation of your parents. They provide well, they want to do what's best for you. There were a couple of instances, one where I was on a baseball team and everybody else had nice white cleats. And I remember going to Kmart, a discount store back in the day, and having to wear the cheapest blue sneakers. And it was the first time in my life that I stood out because we didn't have the money for me not to stand out.
Mm,
And it was something that I wasn't proud of, but I thought to myself, I don't want this to happen to my kids. Not that I want to spoil my kids, but I want to have enough money to make choices where I don't feel the same way. And they wanted to provide for us. They did a good job at that. One of the things that I would often observe about my dad specifically is my dad wanted to do more. He would work some part-time jobs, he would work on the weekends, and he always had this risk appetite to hit it big. The problem was when it came time to really take the leap, he didn't do it. And why I say that was my first job out of college was for a small software company. And I just took the job because I needed a job out of college. We were going to get married soon. I needed to have some stability. And I remember getting passed over for a raise at that first job. And I thought, man, this is just not right. And it was sort of the icing on the cake of why I needed to leave that job. And I
mm-hmm,
realized there was a moment of decision for me to make,
mm,
that I could either choose to stay at that company. And by doing that, I was then making an agreement with myself saying, I will then settle for whatever they say my value is. Is it 4% a year, 5% a year? And if that's the path I pick, I'm agreeing with myself that I'm only worth a 4 to 5% raise a year. Or I could take the less taken path and I could launch my own financial planning business. I could put all the chips on Derrick and give the wheel a spin and see what happens. And I recognize that when my dad was younger, he probably faced that same decision, but he
mm,
chose the 4 to 5% raise because it was safer and he couldn't see down the path that wasn't created yet. Now, I was young, but I was a goal setter and I knew I had to leave. Until the pain is great, the change does not occur. And so I knew the pain is great. I need to change this. And so, was it easy? No. Was it hard? Yes. But looking back, it was so well worth it. But it all started in that moment. And I think a lot of people have that same moment right now because the older we get, I find goals get pressed down and safety gets lifted up.
mm-hmm,
Derrick, you need to provide for your family. You need to have a safer job. You need to have good insurance. You need to have security and stability. And all of that fights against a lot of our entrepreneurial goals that people have. And what I would say, you want to make sure your spouse is on board, but especially as a young married couple, take risks, be bold,
mm,
have courage, ask God for wisdom for that. But that's the time to bet on yourselves, especially when you're younger, before even you have kids sometimes, or they're younger, they're not going to really remember if you were a bit absent launching a business.
mm. And I love that you're touching on that because there is this atmosphere of, I talk to a lot of girlfriends who say, the 8 to 5, it starts to cause friction, and if we're taking it from a spiritual place, I think it's friction with your purpose. But looking at it fundamentally, everybody does want to have that mindset that your dad had, and does in fact choose more or not, more or less, the safe route. When do you know, I wonder, from your expert opinion, like, how do you know that you have just enough wiggle room to where you can make the risk? Because there are those risk takers that don't really care. They're just going to take the leap regardless of what
Right.
it costs them.
I think when you begin to ask yourself, what is it I really want to do? Now, one thing that I don't subscribe to is someone will often say, well, Derrick, if you find the job you love, you'll never work another day in your life. And I don't agree with that at all. You're just going to work hard at a job you like, but you still have to work hard. And what I would encourage people to do is, especially right now, there's a lot of democratization of opportunity occurring where
Yeah.
you don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. As
Right.
long as you have an idea and desire, there are resources that you can put around you that can help you. And what I would tell people listening right now is, and I've told this to my kids as well, especially when you start something new, you need to understand that you will be misunderstood, because the safer path is what people understand because that's how they've lived their life and what their parents told them. So, for example, when I launched my business as a financial advisor, people questioned me, Derrick, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to bet on yourself? Are you sure? What if it doesn't go well? And I said, well, if it doesn't go well, I've got a great story to tell and I'll start something different. But that was my mentality. And so we were having lunch as a family about a year ago. And for some reason, the question popped out of my mouth. I said to our kids, do you guys ever feel misunderstood?
Oh,
You
wow.
could have heard a pin drop. And they said, yes, yes, we do. Because my daughter had gone to college and launched her own email marketing business. My other daughter was in college wanting to launch a business. My two boys decided not to go to college. One is in full time real estate and one is launching his own business. And people question them, well, why aren't you going to college, or why aren't you using your degree? They would question my wife and I, well, what's wrong with your kids? How come they don't want to go to college? And it was almost like we had to defend their decision to become entrepreneurs. And once we put a word to the emotion they were feeling, where the Kinney family is often misunderstood, now we embrace it, and it's like that's normal. And as we talk to other entrepreneurs and other families that do different things than what people expect them to do, they feel misunderstood. And so, what I would tell people now is, if you're not feeling misunderstood, your goals may not be big enough for what you
Mm.
truly want to do.
Ooh, that's powerful. I love that you just mentioned how this is a family thing. And I love that through the literally from the start of your career, your wife has been part of your story.
The
And
whole part, yes.
a big chunk of our crowd, I would say, maybe has like one partner that's, I am all in. We are doing this, or I am doing this, and I will put the best foot forward. And there is the other opposite from the partner that says, whoa, we should prioritize differently. So, was there ever a time where maybe, whether it was your wife's input that really helped shape a decision you made for your business or career? Or was there ever a time on the vice versa that she felt a little uneasy by your risk taking, and how did you approach it?
Well, I think what you've hit on is very real, and it can cause couples to come closer together or put a wedge of divisiveness between them. And a lot of it goes back to, what is your track record as a spouse, as a partner? What have I observed you do? And have you been successful or have you failed at it? And what did you learn from it? So when I left that small company to launch my financial planning business, my wife was fully on board because she saw the pain in me and she saw that job daily making me a lesser version of myself. Now, when I started, though, we barely had two pennies to rub together. An exciting night for us was going to Chili's and buying a bag of chips and salsa for $2. And that was dinner leaning up against our $50 couch we got at the garage sale. And so I cherish those moments because now we're in a much different financial spot. But we think back to that and how thankful we were that we were in this fight together. And what I would encourage people to do is, couples that pray together and plan together, they grow together and stay together. And I would just encourage couples, and it's very normal when one spouse tends to be more the risk taker, one is more the conservative. Keep in mind, those are the very qualities that attracted you to each other. Don't let those qualities make each other the enemy.
Mm,
That is not what we want here. But it's important for both to realize we're going to each have to come closer to the middle for the other person to have trust in what we're about to do. But also, I would tell you, for listeners that might have young children or children as they're getting older, don't rob your kids of your mistakes.
Oof.
Back during COVID, when it was sort of like Little House on the Prairie all over again, we were all around the dinner table and we played this game called Highs and Lows of the Day. A lot of families do this. And I realized my stories were pretty boring. I would talk about the calls I made or the people I saw. There wasn't a whole lot of action to Dad's story. But in one case, I had made an investment a couple weeks earlier and I lost a couple $1,000s on it, took a flyer on it. So I decided to share that during my low. And I said, hey guys, I got to tell you, Dad really made a dumb mistake. Well, you could have heard a pin drop. They're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so good. Dad really screwed up. I can't wait to hear this story. I said, I made this decision with my best thinking. I lost a couple $1,000s. They were like, what? Dad, how could you have done that? What happened? And what I didn't realize was happening was I opened this door so they could begin to see that I wasn't perfect. I was a real person just like them. And it taught me, oh my gosh, I was so focused on acting and looking perfect to my kids. And really, the game is won the less perfect I am to my kids. When they can see me as a real person, those are the better lessons because what we find is if I tell my son, hey, son, I want to tell you a life lesson, you can just see their eyes rolling back in their head. But
Yeah.
if I say to my son, hey, you want to get your favorite burger? Let's hop in the Jeep. Let's go get your burger and you play your favorite playlist while looking straight ahead, not at each other. We can talk about all of life's deepest issues and they're comfortable with it because they're in the zone. They're getting what they want out of the relationship. So if you make a mistake as a parent, don't think you're less than. Actually, you're more than because now you have some great tools to share.
That is, I mean, you really truly learn from experience. And I think that's so beautiful that you get taught that. Some people don't have a father figure, mother figure, somebody that hopefully would align them and lead them in this way. Personally speaking, and really in a very raw and vulnerable way, I don't believe, while I love and respect my parents, I don't believe I learned any good lessons from
Mm,
them about money because money wasn't talked about. And I love that you just brought this up because for some of us, like it's almost like the ghost in the room. It exists, you can tell, but you don't talk about it because you're not quite sure what response you're going to get. So then you enter your adult life and the start of your career, and you believe that you're making wise decisions, but you're very lost in this transition of what money represents. And when you do start making the money, you can start to idolize it.
mm,
And that, biblically speaking for me, of course the Bible says don't have any other idols. But it is difficult when maybe you come from this background where nobody really told you how you should feel about money. And I think one of the best principles you teach people in your book and through everything that you do on your in your profession is to make sure you use the money for good. And I think whether you meant to do this or not, that by using the money for good and giving and it fueling you with purpose, you are removing the idol of like self-indulgence. And so I wonder what you do. How do you advise your children? How do you walk life with abundance and money, making sure that it doesn't portray that idol for you and for the people that you love and for the people that you work with?
So, how this idea came about was I began to hear a voice in culture that was talking about that if you have money, you're bad. That if you're successful in business, you must have done something to hold other people back so that you have the money. I
Mm.
began to hear this criticism lobbed at financially successful people, and it caused me to pause and ask, just because you have money, does that make you a bad person? And then I realized, wait a minute, who would I want to have the money in the world? Do I want good people good-hearted people that if they have money, they're going to do good things with it?
Hmm.
Or do I want the bad people in the world, the dictators in the world, the people around the world that hold people back and suppress them? I know what they're going to do with money. And I
Mm.
thought, I want good people to have more good money to do the good work they want to do. And so that's where this idea was born from. And then what I looked at was psychology really tells us a lot. And we've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or there's all different types of things where at the bottom of this pyramid are the base concerns and desires people have. They want to have food, clothing, shelter, then they want to have relationships, they want to have their toys. But at the very tip of this, and almost all these sort of psychological charts, is words like self meaning, self actualization, purpose, making a difference. And what I find is that people inside of themselves, when they're honest, they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to know that their life is making a difference in other people's lives. They want to know that when their head hits the pillow at night, did they do something to make somebody else's life better?
Mm.
So, one of the stories that I mentioned in the book was a woman named Bibo Calandro did an experiment, and what she talked about was they measured brain waves when people would watch certain commercials on TV. And one of the commercials they had people watch was basically a simple car ad. And it promoted the horsepower of the car and it showed the interior and how the speaker sounded. And they measured how people's brains responded to that visual. And then they compared that to a car ad that when you bought this car, a portion of the proceeds go to help a cause. For example, in this case, it was the US Olympic team and helping first time Olympians who couldn't afford the training costs and the materials and all that it took to achieve this lifelong dream for their country. They would help with that. And they measured how the brain responded to that. Well, what happened was, and how she described this was so interesting. She said, Derrick, in the second ad, when people watched this car ad, but a part of it goes to help a cause, their brain responded in the same way as though they were looking into the eyes of someone they love.
Whoa.
Isn't that powerful? You think about whether it's your spouse, your partner, I mean, the person you love the most, that emotional feeling was similar to how it responded by seeing someone else give. And so, my own personal story, when I was 26 years old, I had a
Mm.
passion for local education and left my other job, became an advisor. I mentioned earlier I was 26. I looked like I was 13. And how would I build my business? Well, one of my passions was I wanted to go back to my alma mater, my local high school, and recognize a teacher and a student of the month. So I came armed with a $50 Amazon gift card for the teacher, a $25 gift card for the student, printed off a certificate, and was able to just to breathe life into them and say, to the teacher, thank you for the impact that you had on me and on so many other students. And to the student of the month, giving them a sense of what their future could look like, of why they're taking science and math and all these things they're wondering, why am I taking? It's preparing them for something bigger. I just wanted to breathe life into them. And so we would get a picture taken with myself and the teacher, the student, the principal. Well, back in those days, we had these things called newspapers, these little kind of papery things that they would throw on people's porches. They don't really have those anymore now, but I began to get phone calls. And I remembered about the fourth or fifth time this happened, Michelle, there was a woman on the phone, and I said, this was the most unprofessional thing I could have possibly said, but I said, ma'am, because she said, Derrick, we want you to be our financial advisor. We see the work you're doing at these local schools. And I said, ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, I'm 26 years old, I'm brand new. Why do you want to work with me when you could work with any other financial advisor? And she paused for a moment and she said, Derrick, we want to work with you because you care about what we care about.
Wow.
And that was my mic drop business building moment right there. And what I realized was she could work with any financial advisor, many that were smarter than me. Now, none were better looking. I did have that going for me. But many had more experience. But she wanted to work with me because she assumed I was competent and caring, but she liked the fact that by working with me, she and her husband were part of something bigger. They were helping recognize teachers and students which were important to them. And so what happened was I began to bake that in to my business. We began to promote that, hey, when you work with us, we're helping support local education. We want to invest back in the lives of teens and make their lives better. And what we would then do at our Christmas parties is even bring some of the principals of these schools to talk to all of our clients and say, hey, just so you know, when you work with Derrick, here are the students that you're helping impact. You're part of something
Wow.
bigger. And so that's where the part of the book really was born out of was no longer do I want people to think about giving as just private. I can't talk about my giving. It's like sex or religion or other things. Nope, we don't talk about that. Now,
Yeah.
you can choose to set what I call a generosity purpose, and that's a cause that you care deeply about. That's the whole crux of this giving and good money. And you can say privately, that's my goal. I want to go make a lot of money by helping a lot of people so I
Mm,
can give a lot of money. But I think the way to supercharge it is that if you have a business or you want to let people know what you're doing, let people know, hey, when you work with us,
mhm.
our generosity purpose is insert the local cause that you care deeply about, the wrong you want to right in your local community.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised by how many more people want to work with you because when they work with you, they're helping make a difference in other people's lives.
Can you ever do too much good? Especially, can you ever do too much good with money? And I'm sure I feel like I know what you're going to tell me, but I want to hear from you because you continue to do so much good. It's like you've done and touched so many things. So is there ever a bottom line?
Well, I think there is, and my answer may surprise you, and that is if I'm putting giving above caring, then I'm losing. In other words, if I'm not devoting time to my wife and my kids and my close friends because I just want to keep giving and I'm making other people's lives better, but the people in my own orbit are not getting the best version of me,
Hmm.
I think that's where you have to evaluate what are my motives in
Yeah,
what I'm doing. And so what I have found is when I'm enrolling my wife and my kids and also letting them know the giving we're doing so that they know this is what normal life in our family is like, then they can do it as well. Because I realized long ago, if I wasn't telling my kids how we were using the good money principles, they would never know. And
mm,
so I didn't want to rob them of that. And so what for me, candidly, it's a motivation. Making more money equals more motivation for me to go make more money. And the key though is by adding value to people's lives. And what I teach all of my business owner consultant, clients that we have is solve a problem. When
yeah,
you can solve a person's problem, that's how you're adding value to their lives. They'll pay you for that. You can make more money and then do more good with that money. Because the goal is when my head and when our listeners' heads hit the pillow tonight, I want them to have lived a day worthy of, they've made other people's lives better, they've lived their best life and they're confident and they know they're making a difference in people's lives. That's the whole concept of the good money revolution.
that's awesome. Thank you, Derek.
My pleasure, Michelle. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this time with you.
Here are my takeaways. Even if you didn't learn good money habits at home, you can transform how you view money today in your own home. Celebrating my shortcomings can empower future generations. Purposeful giving can lead to more intentional success. I want to share with you something very personal. The fact is that talking about money makes me very uncomfortable. So if this resonates, my prayer to you is that hearing this begins to shift your mindset so that you can continue to embrace Zoe, embrace life, while healing your relationship with money.